Chapter 1. The Storm and the Stranger. The cliffs had always sung to me, even when they whispered of danger. Tonight, their song was a warning I should have heeded. Salt spray lashed my face as I navigated the treacherous coastal path, my lantern swinging wildly in the gale. The storm had rolled in from the eastern sea with unusual fury, turning the normally placid waters of Silvapine Cove into a churning mass of gray-green violence. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders, the ruffle doing little to shield me from the wind's icy fingers. The other villagers of Thornhaven thought me mad for venturing out in such weather. Then again, they thought me mad for many reasons. Moonblood. They called me when they thought I couldn't hear. Storm-touched. The kinder ones simply said strange, and left it at that. My mother had been the same before she disappeared into these very woods 15 years ago. She'd left me nothing but her reputation, a cottage at the edge of civilization, and a copper bracelet that never tarnished, no matter how much seawater touched my skin. The bracelet hummed against my wrist now, warm despite the autumn cold, almost as if it were alive. The storm had torn loose the cliff face near Widow's Point, exposing a cache of blood moss that only grew in the deepest, most sheltered crevices. It was worth a month's income to the right buyer, enough to see me through the coming winter without having to endure the suspicious glares of the Thornhaven merchants. I'd spent the afternoon carefully harvesting the delicate red fronds, my fingers stained crimson despite my gloves. My basket was nearly full when I heard it, a sound that cut through the storm's rage like a blade through silk. A cry. No, not quite a cry. Something between a howl and a scream, raw with pain and fury. I froze on the path, lantern held high. The sound came again, weaker this time, from the direction of the tide pools below. During high tide, those pools became a maze of churning water and jagged rocks. Anything caught down there would be dashed to pieces within minutes. Not your concern, Sarah, I muttered to myself, using my mother's habit of self-conversation. Keep walking. Get home. Survive another day. But even as I spoke the words, my feet were already carrying me off the main path, toward the steep descent that led to the shore. The bracelet grew warmer, almost hot now, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The climb down was treacherous. Twice I nearly lost my footing on rain-slick stone. The lantern's light was almost useless in the driving rain, but I'd navigated these cliffs since childhood. My hands knew every handhold, every secure foothold, even in darkness. When I finally reached the rocky beach, I saw it, trapped in the largest tide pool, surrounded by water on 3 sides and sheer cliff on the 4th, was a wolf. But not just any wolf. This creature was massive, easily the size of a small horse, with fur the color of thunderclouds, silver and gray and shot through with streaks of pure white. Blood darkened the water around it, and one of its front legs hung at a sickening angle. Our eyes met across 30 feet of churning foam, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. Those eyes. They weren't the feral yellow of a wild animal. They were silver, the exact shade of moonlight on water, and they held an intelligence that was distinctly, impossibly human. More than human. Something ancient and powerful gazed out at me from that massive wolf's head, something that saw straight through to my bones. The bracelet on my wrist flared with sudden heat, and I gasped, nearly dropping my lantern. In that same instant, the wolf's eyes widened in what looked like shock. It tried to stand, to move toward me, but the injured leg gave out, and it collapsed back into the water with a splash and a sound that was far too human, far too much like anguish. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to climb back up that cliff and forget what I'd seen. Wolves didn't get this large. Wolves didn't look at you with recognition burning in their eyes. Wolves didn't make the bracelet my mother had left me burn like captured lightning against my skin. Instead, I set down my basket and my lantern on a flat rock above the tide line and waded in. The water was shockingly cold, even through my thick skirts and boots. The tide was coming in fast, the pool deepening with each wave that crashed over the rocks. In less than an hour, this entire area would be underwater. The wolf would drown if it didn't bleed out first. Easy, I called out, though the wind stole half my words. I'm coming to help. Don't fight me. The wolf's ears flicked forward, tracking my voice. It watched my approach with those unsettling silver eyes, but made no move to attack. As I drew closer, I could see the extent of its injuries. The broken leg was the least of it. Deep gashes scored its flanks, the marks of claws or teeth, and a particularly vicious wound on its neck still leaked blood into the churning water. Someone or something had tried very hard to kill this creature. "What happened to you?" I whispered, close enough now to touch. The wolf's head turned toward me, and I felt rather than heard its response. A pressure against my mind, like a knock on a door I didn't know I had. Behind that door, impressions flooded in. Betrayal, ambush, cliffs, falling, pain. I staggered, my hand flying to my temple. "What? How are you?" The wolf made a sound, almost like a whimper, and the mental pressure ceased. But the damage was done. I understood now, in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to instinct. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something the villagers' grandmothers warned about in their oldest tales. A shifter, a being that walked as both human and beast, bound to the moon and ancient laws I'd thought were nothing but stories. And somehow, impossibly, it was trying to communicate with me. "You need help," I said, more to myself than to the wolf. "I can't carry you. You're far too large. But I can't leave you here either." The wolf huffed, a sound that might have been agreement or resignation. It shifted slightly, turning to present its injured side more fully to me. Trusting me. God's help me, it was trusting me. I had some supplies in my gathering pouch. Bandages, a needle and thread, a flask of strong spirits I used to clean wounds. Not nearly enough for injuries this severe, but it would have to do. Working quickly, I cleaned what I could, my fingers turning numb in the cold water. The wolf endured my ministrations without complaint, though I felt its pain through that strange mental connection, echoing in my own nerves. As I worked, I talked, partly to calm the creature, partly to calm myself. "I'm Sarah Nightwater, though the villagers just call me the Storm Girl. I live alone, at the edge of the forest. I gather herbs and tend wounds for those brave enough or desperate enough to seek me out." I tied off a bandage around its ribs, wincing at how much blood had been lost. "My mother disappeared when I was 7. They say she ran off with a stranger, but I know better. She left to protect me. From what, she never said." The wolf's eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made me shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. "I suppose you can't tell me who did this to you," I continued, moving to examine the broken leg. "Or why? But someone wanted you dead very badly. And they nearly succeeded." I fashioned a splint from driftwood and strips torn from my underskirt, binding the leg as securely as I dared. It wasn't pretty, but it would keep the bone from shifting. The wolf bore this too without struggle, though I felt phantom pain shoot through my own arm in sympathy. The tide was rising faster now. Water swirled around my thighs, tugging at my skirts with greedy fingers. We were running out of time. "Can you move at all?" I asked desperately. "If I help, can you get to shore?" The wolf's gaze shifted to the cliff face, then back to me. Through our connection, I felt its assessment. Too weak. Too injured. The climb impossible. "Then we find another way," I said firmly, surprised by my own determination. "There's a cave system further up the beach. The entrance is above the tide line. If we can reach it." A wave, larger than the others, crashed over us both. I went under, swallowing bitter salt water, my feet losing purchase on the slippery rocks. Strong jaws clamped gently around my arm, pulling me back to the surface. The wolf had moved, despite its injuries, to keep me from being swept away. I coughed, sputtering, and met those silver eyes again. "Thank you," I gasped. "Now let's both survive this, shall we?" Somehow, through a combination of my pulling and the wolf's determined limping, we made it out of the tide pool. Every step was agony for the creature. I felt its pain like barbed wire dragging through my veins. But it pushed forward with grim determination, leaning heavily on me despite outweighing me by hundreds of pounds. The cave entrance was a dark mouth in the cliff face, just barely visible in the storm-racked darkness. I'd played in these caves as a child, knew they ran deep into the headlands, offering shelter from even the worst weather. We collapsed together just inside the entrance, both shaking violently from cold and exhaustion. The wolf's breathing was labored, its silver eyes dimming. I could feel its life force flickering through our strange bond, like a candle flame in a gale. "No," I said fiercely, pulling off my soaked shawl to cover its massive form. "You don't get to die. Not after I dragged you all the way up here." I fumbled for my gathering pouch with numb fingers, pulling out a small vial of concentrated willow bark tincture. It was meant for humans, but pain was pain, and blood loss was blood loss. I coaxed the wolf's jaws open and poured half the vial down its throat. The effect was almost immediate. The creature's breathing eased slightly, and some of the pain receded from our connection. Its eyes, which had been sliding closed, focused on me again with what looked almost like gratitude. "Rest," I commanded, settling beside the massive form. My own exhaustion was catching up with me, the adrenaline that had sustained me ebbing away. "I'll keep watch. You're safe now." Even as I spoke the words, I wondered if they were true. Safe from the storm, perhaps. Safe from drowning. But whatever had attacked this creature, whoever had tried to kill it, was still out there. And now I'd bound my fate to its survival. The bracelet on my wrist pulsed once, warmly, almost approvingly. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside the cave, a woman and a wolf huddled together for warmth, bound by a connection neither fully understood. And as I drifted toward exhausted sleep, my last thought was of my mother's final words to me, spoken 15 years ago before she vanished into the forest. "When the bracelet warms, follow where it leads. Your destiny lies beyond the village, beyond the safe and the known. Trust in the old blood, Sarah. Trust in what you are." I hadn't understood then, but as the massive wolf shifted closer, sharing its fading body heat, as our breathing synchronized and our heartbeats fell into rhythm through that impossible mental bond, I began to suspect that destiny had finally found me, whether I was ready for it or not. Chapter 2. Revelations in the Dark. I woke to silence, the kind of profound quiet that only comes after a storm has exhausted itself, leaving the world hushed and trembling in its wake. Gray dawn light filtered through the cave entrance, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The wolf was still beside me, its massive body rising and falling with steady breaths. During the night, we'd somehow become tangled together. My hand rested on its chest, fingers buried in thick fur, and I could feel the strong, rhythmic beat of its heart beneath my palm. The bracelet on my wrist was warm but no longer burning, settled into a gentle, persistent heat. As consciousness fully returned, so did awareness of our mental connection. It was quieter now, less overwhelming than it had been in the chaos of the rescue. But it was there, a constant presence at the edge of my thoughts. Through it, I could sense the wolf's current state. Pain, yes, but lessened. Exhaustion. And beneath it all, something else. Determination. Purpose. And a growing awareness that mirrored my own. The wolf's eyes opened, those startling silver irises finding mine immediately. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other. Then I felt it again, that gentle pressure against my mind. But this time, instead of raw impressions and emotions, there were words. Rough and used, as if the speaker had forgotten how to form them properly. "Thank you." I jerked upright, my hand flying away from the wolf's fur. "You can speak. In my mind. You're actually speaking." The wolf's ears flicked back, and I sensed something like rueful amusement through our bond. "Not easily. The injury makes it difficult to hold human thought. But yes, I can speak with you. How is this possible?" I whispered, though even as I asked, pieces were falling into place. The old stories. The legends my mother used to tell me before bed. "You're a shifter. A werewolf. Werewolf." The mental voice carried a tone of distaste. "That is your human word for what I am. We prefer the older name. Lunari." "Lunari," I repeated, the unfamiliar word feeling ancient on my tongue. "I thought you were myths. Stories to frighten children. We prefer it that way. Safer, when humans fear us only in tales." A pause, and I felt the wolf gathering strength for more complex communication. "But you are not entirely human, are you, Sarah Nightwater?" The use of my name, spoken directly into my mind, sent a shiver down my spine. "What do you mean? Of course I'm human. I've always been different. Strange. But that doesn't mean." The bracelet. The wolf's gaze fixed on my wrist. "Ancient silver, worked with old magic. And you hear me when you should not be able to. You feel what I feel. Only those with Lunari blood can form such a bond." "That's impossible," I said, even as my mother's words echoed in my memory. "Trust in the old blood, Sarah. My mother was human. She was born in Thornhaven, lived there her whole life until she disappeared." The wolf's mental voice was gentle but certain. 15 years ago, you said. When you were 7. She left to protect you from those who would have hunted her. Hunted you both." I stood abruptly, backing away from the massive creature. "You don't know that. You don't know anything about my mother." I know she bore the mark of the old bloodlines. I can smell it on you, faint but unmistakable. I know the bracelet you wear was crafted in the ancient forges, given only to those who served as bridges between our kinds. The wolf tried to rise, managed to push itself into a sitting position despite the splinted leg. I know that you should not have been able to save me, should not have survived the tide, should not have found the strength to drag me to safety. But you did, because the old magic in your blood answered to the need. My legs felt weak. I sank down onto a flat rock, my mind reeling. If what you're saying is true, why didn't my mother tell me? Why did she leave without explaining? Protection takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like secrets, sometimes like distance. A wave of sympathy flowed through our connection. Your mother made difficult choices. The bloodlines have been hunted for generations by those who fear what we represent. Humans who hate us. Lunari who mistrust those with mixed heritage. She was trying to keep you safe. Safe, I repeated bitterly. I've spent 15 years alone, whispered about, treated like something cursed. If I have this blood you speak of, it didn't protect me from anything. It kept you alive. The wolf's mental voice was firm. The villagers feared you but did not harm you. They kept their distance but did not drive you out. The old magic in your blood created a boundary they could sense but not name. It has been protecting you all along, even if you did not know to call upon it. I wanted to argue, to deny everything this creature was telling me. But deep down, in a place I'd always kept carefully locked away, something resonated with its words. I'd always known I was different, had always felt the pull of the moon, the whisper of the wind, the way animals watched me with two knowing eyes. I'd attributed it to my mother's strangeness passed down. But what if it was something more? Something older? Who are you? I asked finally. You know so much about me, about the bloodlines and the old magic. But I don't even know your name. The wolf was silent for a long moment. Through our bond, I felt conflict, calculation, and finally resignation. My name is Kale Stormcrown, and was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Alpha King, I breathed. Your royalty. I am the ruler of the largest Lunari pack in the Eastern lands. Or I was until 3 nights ago. His mental voice darkened with remembered pain and rage. I was betrayed. By wolves I trusted, led by my own cousin. They ambushed me during the new moon, when our powers are weakest. They meant to kill me, to claim my territory and my throne. Your cousin did this? I looked at the bandages I'd wrapped around his massive form, at the splinted leg and half-healed wounds. Your own family? Family means little when power is at stake. Kale's ears flattened against his skull. Ryland has always coveted my position. He believes himself stronger, more worthy. He gathered others who shared his ambition, promised them positions and territory if they helped him overthrow me. But you survived, I said. You escaped. Barely. I managed to kill 2 of them before Ryland's second, a wolf named Tash, slashed my leg. I shifted mid-fight, used the confusion to flee. But I was injured, disoriented. I ran blindly, trying to reach the coast where I knew allies might shelter me. He looked toward the cave. Entrance toward the cliffs beyond. I never made it. Ryland's hunters tracked me to the cliffs. I fought, but I was already weakened. They drove me over the edge. The fall should have killed you, I realized. Into those rocks in that storm. Nothing should have survived that. I almost didn't. I was drowning when I felt something. A pull, like a rope thrown to a drowning man. It led me to that tide pool, kept me conscious just long enough to cry out. Kale's silver eyes met mine, and I felt the weight of what he was about to say. It led me to you, Sarah. The bracelet called to something in my bloodline, and I answered without knowing what I was answering to. I looked down at the copper band on my wrist, seeing it with new eyes. What is this thing, really? A bond mark, created centuries ago when the first of your ancestors' line pledged themselves to mine. They were healers and seers, humans with enough Lunari blood to bridge both worlds. They served as advisors, protectors, keepers of ancient knowledge. In return, my bloodline swore to shelter and honor them. The bracelet is both symbol and tool of that oath. My mother, I whispered. She knew all of this. She wore this before me. She would have been taught the old ways, yes. Would have known her purpose, had she lived long enough to claim it. Kale's mental voice gentled. You were meant to inherit more than just the bracelet, Sarah. You were meant to inherit her role, her knowledge, her place in our world. but she disappeared before she could complete your training. The weight of it all pressed down on me. A destiny I'd never asked for, a heritage I'd never known about, responsibilities I couldn't begin to understand. I'm just a village outcast who gathers herbs and tends minor wounds. I don't know anything about your world, about being an advisor or protector, or whatever this bond mark is supposed to make me. And yet you saved my life. Cale shifted closer, his massive head lowering to my eye level. You heard my call when you should not have been able to. You pulled me from the water when you should not have had the strength. You dressed my wounds and eased my pain when you should have run screaming from a creature of my size. The bond mark chose you, Sarah. It recognized what you are, even if you do not yet recognize it yourself. What if I don't want this? The question came out smaller than I intended. What if I just want to return to my simple life, to my cottage and my herbs and my solitude? Then you may. Cale's response surprised me. I will not force this upon you. The old oaths were made by choice, honored by willing hearts. If you walk away now, I will understand. I will find another way to survive, to reclaim my throne. You're still too injured, I protested automatically. You can't even walk properly. And if your cousin's hunters are looking for you, they will find me eventually, whether you stay or go. A grim resignation colored his thoughts. Ryland will not rest until he is certain I am dead. He cannot risk me returning to challenge him. I should have taken the out he was offering. Should have gathered my things, climbed back up to the coastal path, and returned to my safe, lonely existence. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. Couldn't. Something had changed in me during that storm-tossed night. Some door had been opened that I couldn't close again. How long? I asked. How long until you can shift back to human form? Until you can defend yourself? 3 days, perhaps 4. The new moon's weakness will fade with the waxing crescent. But I would need shelter, food, and continued care of my wounds. I would need me, I finished. You would need me. Yes. Simple. Honest. I would need you, Sarah Nightwater. Not because of any ancient oath or magical bond, but because right now, in this moment, you are the only one I can trust. The only one who can help me survive long enough to reclaim what was stolen from me. I stood, pacing the small cave as I wrestled with the decision. Through our bond, Cale didn't push or persuade. He simply waited, patient as stone, while I chose my path. Finally, I turned back to him. My cottage is 2 hours from here if we take the inland route through the forest. It's isolated. No one from the village comes that way unless they desperately need my help. We could shelter there while you heal. We? Something like hope flickered through our connection. Yes, we, I said more firmly now. I may not understand all of this, may not know what I'm truly agreeing to, but I won't leave you to die alone in a cave. And I won't let your cousin win through treachery and murder. I met those silver eyes steadily. Besides, I think my mother would have wanted me to honor the old ways, even if she never got the chance to teach them to me properly. Cale rose slowly, painfully, to all 4 paws. Even injured, even diminished, he was magnificent. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Then we are agreed. You will shelter me, tend my wounds, help me regain my strength. And in return, I will teach you what I know of your heritage, of the old magic in your blood. When I am healed, when I reclaim my throne, you will have a place of honor in my court if you desire it. This I swear. The bracelet on my wrist flared with sudden warmth, and I gasped as power surged between us. The bond, which had been tentative and new, suddenly solidified into something unbreakable. I could feel Cale's surprise mirroring my own, and beneath it, a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. What just happened? I asked breathlessly. The oath has been witnessed and sealed by the old magic. Cale's mental voice held a mixture of awe and concern. We are bound now, truly bound. Your life to mine, mine to yours, until the oath is fulfilled or death claims us both. That seems rather permanent, I managed, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. Most oaths are. A hint of dark humor colored his thoughts. But do not worry, Sarah. I do not make vows lightly, and I always honor my word. You will not regret this choice. I'd better not, I muttered, gathering my scattered supplies. Because I have a feeling everything in my life is about to change. It already has, Cale said quietly. The moment you chose to save me, you set both our fates on a new path. Now we walk it together. Outside the cave, the sun was rising over the storm-washed cliffs, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new day dawning. A new life beginning. And as I helped Kale limp out into the morning light, our mental bond humming with shared purpose, I couldn't help but wonder what my mother would think if she could see me now. Following the old magic, just as she'd told me to do. Trusting in the blood I hadn't known I carried. Walking into destiny with a werewolf king at my side. The village of Thornhaven would have plenty to whisper about when they realized I'd vanished. But somehow, I suspected I wouldn't be coming back. Not as the same person who'd left yesterday morning to gather herbs in a storm. That Sarah Nightwater was gone, and in her place stood someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who was just beginning to understand what she was truly meant to become. The journey home would be long and dangerous. Ryland's hunters would be searching. The path forward was uncertain at best. But as Kale pressed close to my side and we began the slow trek into the forest, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. I felt like I belonged. Chapter 3, Sanctuary and Secret. The forest path to my cottage had never seemed so long. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart leap into my throat. Kale moved beside me with grim determination, but I could feel his pain through our bond like echoes of thunder in my own bones. The splinted leg dragged slightly with each step, and fresh blood had begun to seep through some of the bandages I'd applied in the cave. We'd been walking for nearly an hour when Kale suddenly froze, his ears swiveling forward. Through our connection, alarm flooded my senses. Someone approaches. From the east. 2, perhaps 3 individuals. Hunters, I whispered, my hand instinctively moving to grasp his fur. Human, not Lenari. A pause as he scented the air more carefully. Villagers from Thornhaven, I think. They carry the smell of wood smoke and fish. My mind raced. If villagers found me traveling with a wolf of Kale's size, there would be questions I couldn't answer. Panic. Possibly violence. Can you hide? There's a thicket about 20 yards to the north. Dense enough to conceal you if you stay low. I cannot move quickly enough. They will hear me. The voices were getting closer. I could make out words now. Saw her heading this way yesterday. That was Garrick, the fisherman's son. Storm was fierce last night. And Mara, the baker's daughter. They were looking for me. Probably worried I'd been caught in the weather. Stay absolutely still, I commanded Kale, my voice low and urgent. I'll lead them away. Trust me. Before he could protest, I stepped out onto the main path, making sure I was visible from the direction of the voices. I schooled my features into an expression of relieved surprise as Garrick and Mara came into view around a bend. Sarah. Mara's face lit up with genuine concern. Thank the gods. We thought you might have been swept away in the storm. The cliff path was flooded, Garrick added, his eyes scanning me for injuries. We found your lanterns smashed on the rocks this morning. Everyone feared the worst. I manufactured a sheepish smile, very aware of Kale hidden in the underbrush behind me. I'm fine, as you can see. I took shelter in one of the coastal caves when the storm hit. I was just making my way home. Mara frowned, looking at my mud-stained skirts and the scratches on my hands. You look half frozen. Come back to the village. My mother will have hot soup ready, and you can rest properly. That's kind but unnecessary. I gestured toward the forest path. My cottage is closer, and I have everything I need there. I'll be fine. At least let us walk with you, Garrick insisted. Those caves attract all manner of wildlife. Did you hear the howling last night? Wolves and close too. Unnatural large from the sound of them. Ice slid down my spine. Through the bond, I felt Kale's tension ratchet higher. Just the wind playing tricks, I said lightly. Storms always make ordinary sounds seem monstrous. But Garrick was already moving past me, his eyes on the ground. These tracks, Sarah. Look at them. Far too large for any normal wolf. He crouched, examining the impressions Kale's paws had left in the soft earth. And fresh, made within the last hour. Mara had gone pale. We should get back to the village. Warn the others. If there's something that size roaming the forest. It's probably just a bear, I interrupted, desperately trying to redirect their attention. They come down from the mountains this time of year, looking for food before winter. Bears don't leave tracks like wolves, Garrick said, still studying the prints. His hand moved to the hunting knife at his belt. We should follow these. See where they lead. If there's a predator this close to Thornhaven, I cannot let them follow my trail. Kale's voice resonated in my mind. They will find me, and I am in no condition to flee. My heart pounded. I could feel the situation spiraling out of control. Garrick, Mara, please. The creature is long gone by now. There's no point tracking it. But Garrick was already moving into the underbrush, following the disturbed vegetation. It went this way. Recently, too. The broken branches are still weeping sap. Panic clawed at my throat. In seconds, he would find Kale. And then everything would fall apart. Without thinking, I reached for the warmth of the bracelet on my wrist, silently begging for help, for guidance, for anything that might prevent disaster. The copper band flared hot against my skin, and suddenly I felt it. Power, raw and ancient, flowing up from some deep well inside me that I hadn't known existed. It moved through my veins like liquid moonlight, seeking release, seeking purpose. "Stop," I said, and my voice resonated with something that was not entirely my own. Garrick froze mid-step. So did Mara. Both turned to look at me with expressions of confused surprise. The power was still flowing through me, and with it came instinctive knowledge. Words in a language I'd never learned formed on my tongue. "You will not follow those tracks. You will return to Thornhaven and tell the others that you found me safe. You will remember that I took shelter from the storm and that there was nothing unusual in the forest. Nothing to fear. Nothing to hunt." As I spoke, the bracelet grew warmer, pulsing in rhythm with my words. I watched in amazement as Garrick's hand dropped away from his knife, as the tension left his shoulders. Mara's fearful expression smoothed into calm acceptance. "Of course," Garrick said slowly, his voice slightly distant. "Nothing unusual. Just Sarah safe from the storm." "We should get back to the village," Mara agreed, nodding. "Tell everyone she's all right." They turned, moving back down the path with the unhurried steps of people who'd simply completed a task. I watched them go, my heart still racing, the power slowly ebbing back to wherever it had come from. "What did you just do?" Kale's mental voice was filled with astonishment. "I have no idea," I whispered, staring at my hands as if they belonged to a stranger. I needed them to leave, and somehow I made them want to. That was compulsion. Mind magic. One of the rarest gifts of the old bloodlines. Kale emerged from the thicket, limping to my side. His silver eyes studied me with new respect. Most with Lenari blood never manifest such power. It requires both innate ability and the right trigger. "The bracelet," I said, looking at the copper band. It had cooled now, but I could still feel residual warmth. "It helped me, guided me. The bond mark amplified what was already within you. But the power itself, the ability to touch and influence minds, that comes from your own bloodline." He paused, and I sensed calculation behind his thoughts. "This changes things, Sarah. With training, with proper guidance, you could become far more than a simple advisor or healer." "I don't want to control people," I said, unsettled by what I'd just done. That felt wrong, like a violation. It was necessary, and you used it with restraint, only taking the edge off their fear and redirecting their attention. That is the mark of wisdom. Kale started moving again, slower now. His exhaustion was catching up with him. "But you are right to be cautious. Such power can corrupt if wielded carelessly. Your mother would have taught you that." We walked in silence for several minutes, my mind churning with implications. Finally, I voiced the question that had been growing since we left the cave. "Kale, why didn't Ryland just kill you outright? Why drive you off a cliff and hope the fall finished you? It seems like an uncertain method." Through our bond, I felt his hesitation. There are laws among the Lenari, ancient laws that govern succession and challenge. An alpha can only be replaced by someone who defeats them in formal combat, witnessed by the pack elders. Or, I prompted, or by natural causes that leave no obvious marks of murder. His mental voice was grim. A fall from a cliff in a storm would appear accidental. Ryland could claim I'd fled from a righteous challenge, that I'd died as a coward rather than face him with honor. It would shame my memory and give him legitimate claim to my throne. That's why he can't know you survived, I realized. If you return, if you challenge him properly, the pack will see that I am not the coward he painted me as, that I survived his treachery and returned to claim what is mine by right. Determination flowed through our connection. But I must regain my strength first. Must heal completely before I face him. In my current state, he would cut me down in seconds. My cottage finally came into view through the trees, its stone walls and thatched roof a welcome sight. I'd inherited it from my mother, built at the forest's edge where most villagers feared to venture. Now I understood why she'd chosen such isolation. Privacy. Safety. A place where she could practice the old ways without prying eyes. "We're here," I said with relief. "Let's get you inside and properly bandaged." The interior of my cottage was simple but well maintained. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with their mingled scents. Shelves lined the walls, packed with jars of salves and tinctures, the work of years. A small hearth dominated one corner, and in another stood my narrow bed, covered with thick quilts against the autumn chill. Cale barely made it through the door before his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the woven rug before the hearth with a pained grunt that I felt echo through our bond. "Easy," I murmured, already moving to build up the fire. "You've pushed yourself too hard. Rest now while I prepare proper medicine." I worked quickly, drawing on every scrap of healing knowledge my grandmother had passed to my mother, and my mother had passed to me. Yarrow and comfort for the wounds. Willow bark for pain and fever. Honey to prevent infection. I boiled water and steeped powerful healing teas, mixing poultices with sure hands. As I worked, I felt Cale watching me through half-closed eyes. His presence in my mind had become a constant, no longer startling but strangely comforting, like having a second heartbeat in my chest. "You have skilled hands," he observed as I cleaned and redressed his wounds. "And a healer's instinct. Your mother taught you well." "She died when I was young," I said softly, carefully stitching a particularly deep gash on his shoulder. "But yes, she taught me what she could. The rest I learned from her journals, her recipe books. Trial and error." "There are journals?" Sudden interest sharpened his mental voice. "Written records of the old ways?" "A few. Mostly herb lore and healing techniques." "But," I hesitated. "There are pages in code that I could never decipher. Symbols I don't recognize. I always assumed they were just my mother's private thoughts." "Show me. After I rest." "Those symbols might be the old language, the written form of Lenari communication. If your mother was recording knowledge of the bloodlines, she would have used that script to keep it secret." Hope fluttered in my chest. "You could read them? Translate them? Perhaps, if I am right about what they contain." He shifted slightly, settling more comfortably. "But first I need sleep. True healing sleep. And you need the same. We are both exhausted beyond measure." He was right. Now that the immediate danger had passed, fatigue crashed over me like a wave. I hadn't slept properly in over a day, and the use of the compulsion magic had drained me more than I'd realized. I banked the fire and retrieved my mother's journals from their hiding place in a loose stone in the hearth. 3 leather-bound books, filled with her careful handwriting. I set them within easy reach, then sank down onto the rug beside Cale's massive form. "Is this appropriate?" I asked uncertainly. "You're a king. Should I prepare better accommodations? Right now, I am a wounded wolf who owes you his life." His mental voice was warm with something that might have been affection. "Formality can wait until I can stand without bleeding. For now, your presence is comfort enough." I settled against his side, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The warmth of his body seeped into my bones, chasing away the last of the chill from our ordeal. Through our bond, I could sense his pain gradually easing as the medicines took effect, his consciousness drifting toward the healing sleep he desperately needed. "Sarah," his voice whispered in my mind, already fading. "Thank you. For everything. You could have left me to die. Many would have. I'm starting to think I couldn't have left you if I'd tried," I murmured, one hand resting on his side. "I think the bracelet, the bond, whatever this is between us, I think it was always meant to happen. Perhaps." A pause. "Or perhaps you are simply a good person who saves wounded creatures. Either way, I am grateful our paths crossed." His consciousness faded into sleep, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the crackling of the fire. I looked down at the bracelet on my wrist, at the journals stacked nearby, at the massive wolf whose steady breathing had already become a familiar comfort. 24 hours ago, I'd been a lonely outcast gathering herbs in a storm. Now I was bound by ancient oath to a werewolf king, discovering powers I'd never known I possessed, preparing to help him reclaim a throne in a world I barely understood. My mother's words echoed again. "Trust in the old blood, Sarah. Trust in what you are." I was beginning to understand what she meant, and as I drifted towards sleep myself, one hand still resting on Cale's fur, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the journals might reveal. What other truths about my heritage waited to be discovered. Outside, the forest had grown quiet, but I knew the peace wouldn't last. Somewhere out there, Ryland and his hunters were searching. And when they found us, not if, but when, Everything would depend on how quickly Kale could heal, how quickly I could learn to control these new powers, and how strong the bond between us truly was. The fire burned low. The afternoon light faded toward evening, and in my small cottage at the forest's edge, a woman and a wolf slept, bound by magic and oath, sheltering together against the dangers that would surely come. Chapter 4. The Journals and the Hunters. I woke to the sound of pages turning. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the cottage in dim orange light. Kale was awake, his massive head bent over one of my mother's journals, which looked absurdly small between his enormous paws. He was using one careful claw to turn the pages, his silver eyes scanning the text with intense concentration. "You're awake," he observed without looking up. "Good. You needed the rest. You were broadcasting exhaustion through our bond so loudly I could barely concentrate." I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Through the window, I could see twilight settling over the forest. How long was I asleep? 4 hours. Your body needed it. He finally looked at me, and I sensed satisfaction in his mental voice. "I have been reading your mother's journals. Sarah, these are remarkable. She documented decades of knowledge about the old bloodlines, about the bond between our peoples. This is a treasure beyond measure." I moved closer, looking over his shoulder at the open page. My mother's familiar handwriting filled the margins, but interspersed throughout were the strange symbols I'd never been able to decipher. "Can you read the coded parts?" "Yes. It is the old tongue, as I suspected. Written Linari." His claw pointed to a series of flowing symbols that looked almost like waves or wind currents. "This passage here describes the awakening process. How those with dormant Linari blood can be triggered into manifesting their abilities." "What triggers it?" I asked, leaning closer. "Several things. Extreme danger. The presence of a powerful Linari. Or," he hesitated, "a soul bond forming. The deepest connection possible between our kind." Something in his tone made my heart skip. "Is that what we have? A soul bond?" "I do not know yet. Such bonds are rare, formed only between those whose spirits recognize each other across lifetimes." He turned another page carefully. "But the signs are there. The strength of our mental connection. The way you feel my pain and I sense your emotions. The fact that the bond mark sealed our oath without either of us consciously willing it." I sat down heavily on the rug beside him, processing this information. "What does it mean, if we are soul bonded?" "It means our lives are intertwined in ways neither of us can fully control. It means your well-being affects mine and vice versa. It means..." He trailed off, and through our connection I sensed uncertainty mixed with something warmer. Something he wasn't ready to name. "It means we are bound together in more than just oath and obligation." Before I could respond, Kale's head snapped up, his ears pricking forward. Alarm flooded through our bond so powerfully it made me gasp. "They're here. Ryland's hunters. 3 of them, approaching from the south." My blood turned to ice. "How close?" "Half a mile. Moving fast. They must have picked up my scent." He struggled to his feet, favoring the injured leg. "You need to run, Sarah. There's still time for you to escape. They want me, not you." "I'm not leaving you," I said firmly, already moving to the weapons rack on the wall. My mother had kept a hunting bow and a short blade for protection. I'd never had cause to use them, but I knew which end was sharp. You cannot fight trained Linari warriors. They will kill you without hesitation. Then we'll have to make sure they don't get the chance. I knocked an arrow with shaking hands, positioning myself by the window. "You said you'd teach me about my powers. Well, now's an excellent time to start." Kale's frustration and fear for me pulsed through the bond, but underneath it I sensed grudging respect. "Very well, but listen carefully. You used compulsion magic earlier on the villagers. That same power can be used on Linari, but it's harder. Our minds have natural defenses, shields built over years of training. How do I break through those shields?" "You don't. Not directly. Instead, you look for cracks, for moments of doubt or distraction. When a wolf is focused on attacking, when their attention is fixed on violence, their mental defenses lower slightly. That's when you strike." Through the window, I caught movement in the trees. 3 massive shapes, larger even than Kale, were circling the cottage. Wolves with fur like midnight, their eyes glowing amber in the failing light. The one with the scarred muzzle is Tash. Kale's voice was tight with old anger. "Ryland's second. The one who broke my leg. The gray female is Senna, and the rust-colored male is Brock." all skilled fighters. All loyal to Ryland. What do they want? I whispered, though I already knew. Proof of my death. They tracked me here, and now they need to finish what they started. He positioned himself between me and the door, despite his injuries. When they attack, aim for Brock. He's the youngest, the most impulsive. If you can confuse him, make him hesitate, it might give us an opening. An opening for what? You can barely stand. For you to run while I hold them off. Absolutely not. I drew the bowstring back, sighting along the arrow. We're in this together, remember? Soul bonded, or whatever we are. Your fight is my fight now. The largest wolf, Tash with his scarred muzzle, padded up to the cottage door. When he spoke, his voice resonated directly in my mind, far smoother and more practiced than Kale's still rough mental communication. Alpha King, we know you shelter within. Come out and face your judgment with whatever dignity remains to you. Kale's answering growl shook the cottage walls. I am still your king, Tash. Stand down, and I will show mercy. Continue this treachery, and I will see you all executed for treason. Senna's laugh was like shattered glass. You are in no position to threaten anyone, Kale. Ryland leads the pack now. The council has accepted his ascension. You are yesterday's ruler, clinging to a throne that no longer exists. They're lying, I whispered to Kale. The council couldn't accept a new alpha this quickly, could they? No. They're trying to break my resolve, make me believe all is lost. But I felt his uncertainty through the bond. However, the longer I remain missing, the more legitimacy Ryland gains. I need to return soon, or his lie will become truth. Brock's voice joined the others. And who is the human female we smell inside? Your healer? Your hostage? Does she know what you are, what we are? Humans never react well to our true nature. An idea sparked in my mind. They don't know about the bond, I said softly. They don't know about my bloodline. No, they assume you are an ordinary human who happened upon me by chance. Kale's thoughts raced ahead of mine. They will not expect resistance from you. Will not defend against what they do not anticipate. I set down the bow and moved to stand beside Kale, one hand resting on his shoulder. Through our bond, I felt his alarm. Sarah, what are you doing? Giving us an advantage. I raised my voice so the wolves outside could hear. I know exactly what he is. I know what all of you are. And I'm not afraid. The cottage door exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood. Tash burst through first, his massive form filling the doorway. His amber eyes fixed on me with predatory interest. Brave words from one so fragile. Tell me, little human, do you know how easily I could tear out your throat? The bracelet on my wrist flared hot. Power surged through me, and this time I didn't fight it. I met Tash's eyes directly and spoke with that same resonance I'd used on the villagers. Do you know how easily I could make you forget why you came here? Tash froze. Confusion rippled across his lupin features. Behind him, Senna and Brock crowded into the doorway, their attention now fully on me. She bears the old mark. Senna's mental voice was sharp with surprise. On her wrist, copper wrought with moon symbols. She's one of the bloodline. Impossible, Brock snarled. The bloodlines died out generations ago. Ryland said so. Ryland lied about many things, I said, feeling the power build within me with each word. Just as he lied when he said your alpha fled like a coward. Kale fought you. For against one during the new moon, when you knew he'd be weakest. And still he survived. Tash's lips pulled back from enormous fangs. Clever words won't save either of you. We have our orders. Kill the Alpha King, and anyone who shelters him. He lunged forward, and instinct took over. I thrust my hand out, the bracelet blazing with light, and screamed a word in a language I didn't consciously know. Power exploded from my palm in a visible wave of silvery light. Tash slammed into an invisible barrier 3 feet from us. He yelped in pain and surprise, stumbling backward into Senna and Brock. All 3 wolves stared at the shimmering wall of energy that now separated them from us, its surface rippling like water. A ward, Kale's mental voice was filled with astonishment. You manifested a defensive ward. Sarah, that takes most bloodline descendants years to master. Well, I'm a quick learner, I gasped, already feeling the strain of maintaining the barrier. Sweat beaded on my forehead. How long can I hold this? Not long. Ward magic is exhausting. Minutes at best. Tash had recovered from his shock. He circled the barrier, testing it with careful pause. Impressive, but you're untrained. I can smell the effort it costs you. You'll collapse long before we tire. He was right. The power was already draining from me like water through a sieve. My legs trembled, threatening to buckle. Through our bond, I felt Cale's desperate calculation. He couldn't fight them, not in his condition. And I couldn't maintain the ward much longer. Sarah, Cale's voice was urgent in my mind. Can you do what you did to the villagers? Redirect their attention. Make them forget we're here? Not while maintaining the ward. It takes all my concentration just to keep them out. Then you'll have to drop the barrier and strike in the moment of confusion. It's our only chance. My heart hammered. If I miss, if the compulsion doesn't work, then we die together. His mental voice softened. But I would rather die fighting beside you than cowering behind a shield. Trust your instincts, Sarah. Trust the old blood. I drew a shaky breath, gathering what remained of my strength. Through the bond, I felt Cale preparing himself, ready to lunge despite his injuries. Ready to buy me precious seconds with his own life if necessary. Together, I whispered. Together, he agreed. I dropped the ward. The barrier dissolved in a shower of silver sparks, and Tash leaped forward with a triumphant snarl. But I was already moving, the power redirecting from defense to attack. I caught his eyes as he closed the distance, and I poured every ounce of will I possessed into a single command. Sleep. The word resonated not with sound but with pure mental force, amplified by the bracelet until it felt like a physical blow. Tash's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed mid-leap, hitting the floor hard enough to shake the cottage. Behind him, Senna and Brock staggered, the compulsion washing over them as well. But my inexperience showed. Where Tash had fallen into instant unconsciousness, the other two merely stumbled, shaking their heads groggily. The compulsion had affected them, but not disabled them completely. Cale didn't hesitate. Despite his broken leg, despite his exhaustion, he launched himself at Brock with a roar that was more felt than heard. They collided in a mass of fur and fangs, rolling across the cottage floor. Blood splattered across the worn wood. Senna recovered faster than her companion. She lunged not at Cale but at me, correctly identifying me as the greater threat. Her jaws snapped closed inches from my throat as I threw myself backward, scrambling for the hunting knife I'd dropped. My fingers closed around the hilt just as Senna pinned me to the floor, her weight crushing the air from my lungs. Her breath was hot and rank on my face, her amber eyes burning with hatred. You should have stayed in your village, little blood traitor. Should have let nature take its course. The bracelet was burning against my wrist, but I had no strength left for magic. My hand tightened on the knife, and I drove it upward with desperate force. The blade sank into Senna's shoulder. Not a killing blow, but enough to make her rear back with a howl of pain. I rolled away, gasping for air. Across the room, Cale had Brock pinned, his jaws locked around the younger wolf's throat. Through our bond, I felt his exhaustion, his wounds reopening from the exertion. He couldn't hold Brock much longer. Senna was recovering, her eyes fixed on me with murderous intent. Tash still lay unconscious, but his breathing was strengthening. He'd wake soon, and when he did, we'd be overwhelmed. Cale, I choked out. We can't win this. There are too many. I know. His mental voice was strained. But I can buy you time to escape. The forest. No. I forced myself to my feet, swaying. There has to be another way. The bracelet pulsed against my skin, and suddenly I felt it. A presence in the forest, moving closer. No, multiple presences. Wolves. At least a dozen of them, approaching fast from the north. More hunters, I thought desperately. We're finished. But Cale's sudden surge of hope flooded through our bond. No, not hunters. The scent is familiar. It's... The cottage wall exploded inward in a shower of wood and stone. An enormous wolf, larger even than Cale, burst through with several others at his flanks. His fur was pure white, marked with strange blue patterns that seemed to glow in the dim light. His eyes, when they fixed on Tash and the others, burned with cold fury. Stand down, the newcomer's mental voice boomed like thunder. By order of the Northern Council, this attack is hereby declared unlawful. Any who resist will be executed for treason against the rightful Alpha King. Senna and Brock froze. Tash, stirring from unconsciousness, took one look at the white wolf and went very still, his ears flattening in submission. Cale released Brock and limped forward, relief and exhaustion warring in his stance. Marcus, brother, you came. Of course I came. The white wolf's fierce expression softened as he looked at Cale. When you disappeared, when Ryland's lies began to spread, I knew something was wrong. I gathered those still loyal and tracked you here." His silver blue eyes shifted to me, assessing. "And you found yourself an unexpected ally, I see." I stood there, knife still clutched in my trembling hand, acutely aware of how I must look, covered in blood and mud, half wild with exhaustion and terror, facing down a dozen giant wolves in my ruined cottage. "Brother," I managed to say. "You're Cale's brother?" "Half-brother," Marcus corrected, his mental voice carrying a hint of amusement. "And you must be the one the bond mark chose. I can see it glowing on your wrist even from here." "The bond mark didn't mention this was going to be quite so violent," I said faintly, and then my legs finally gave out. I would have hit the floor, but Cale was there, catching me against his side. Through our bond, I felt his gratitude, his relief, and underneath it all, something deeper. Something that made my heart race for entirely different reasons than fear. "You saved my life," he said softly, "meant only for me." Again, "We saved each other," I murmured, resting my forehead against his fur. "That's what soul-bonded means, right?" "That's what it means," he agreed. Marcus was securing Tash and the others, his wolves binding them with ropes that hummed with a faint magical resonance. He glanced back at us, and I sensed approval in his gaze. "Rest now, both of you. You are safe. The hunters are captured, and Ryland's treachery will be exposed before the council. Justice will be served." But even as relief washed through me, even as the immediate danger passed, I knew this was far from over. Ryland still held Cale's throne. The council still believed his lies. And I was bound to Cale now in ways I was only beginning to understand. The real battle, I suspected, was just beginning. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. The journey to the northern court took 3 days. Marcus had brought horses, understanding that Cale couldn't travel in wolf form with his injuries still healing. The transformation back to human had been agonizing to witness, even through the mental buffer of our bond. I'd held Cale's hand through it, feeling every snap of bone realigning, every muscle tearing and reforming. When it was finally over, the man before me took my breath away. Cale in human form was tall and broad-shouldered, his body marked with the scars of countless battles. His hair was the same silver-black as his wolf fur, falling to his shoulders in thick waves. But it was his eyes that held me, those same silver irises, burning with intelligence and power, now set in a face of sharp angles and fierce beauty. "Stop staring," he'd said with a tired smile, his actual voice deeper and rougher than his mental one. "You're making me self-conscious." "You're a king," I'd replied, still processing. "You could have mentioned you look like that. Would it have changed anything?" His hand had tightened on mine. "When you pulled me from the river, when you sheltered me, when you fought beside me, would knowing I was handsome have mattered?" "No," I'd admitted. "But it does explain why half of Marcus's wolves keep staring at you with a mixture of terror and devotion." Now, as we approached the great stone fortress that served as the seat of northern power, my nervousness returned in full force. Cale rode beside me, his posture straight despite the pain I could still feel echoing through our bond. He dressed in formal attire that Marcus had brought, dark leather and fur that spoke of both elegance and danger. A silver crown sat on his brow, marking him unmistakably as royalty. I wore one of my mother's old dresses, the finest I owned, but it felt woefully inadequate. The copper bracelet gleamed on my wrist, the only thing marking me as anything other than an ordinary village girl. "Stop doubting yourself," Cale's voice whispered in my mind. "You are the last of the bloodlines, the one the bondmark chose. You have faced down hunters and manifested powers most Lenari trained decades to master. You belong at my side." "I don't know how to act at court," I whispered back. "I don't know the customs, the protocols." "Then you'll learn." He reached over, his hand finding mine. "Together, as we've done everything else." Marcus rode up on my other side, his white wolf form shimmering and reforming into his human shape. He was older than Cale, his hair pure silver, his face marked with the wisdom of years. "We're here. The council has been summoned. They're waiting in the great hall." My stomach twisted with anxiety. Will they accept Cale's return? What if they believe Ryland's version of events? "They'll believe the evidence we present," Marcus said firmly. "Tash and the others will testify, willing or not. And your presence, Sarah, will prove that the old bonds still hold power. That Cale was chosen by something greater than politics or ambition." The fortress gates opened before us, massive things of iron and oak. Guards in ceremonial armor lined the courtyard, their eyes widening as they recognized Cale. Whispers spread like wildfire through the assembled crowd. The Alpha King lives. He returns. Ryland's claim was false. We dismounted, and I tried not to tremble as Cale offered me his arm. "Stay close," he murmured. "The council chamber can be intimidating." That was an understatement. The great hall was vast, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadow. 12 thrones arranged in a semicircle dominated the far end, each occupied by an elder in either human or wolf form. And standing in the center, his face a mask of barely controlled fury, was a man who could only be Ryland. He looked like Cale might have, if cruelty and ambition had twisted his features. The same silver-black hair, the same powerful build. But his eyes were pale yellow, and they burned with hatred as they fixed on us. "Impossible," Ryland breathed. "You died. I saw you fall." "You saw what you wanted to see," Cale said calmly, his voice carrying through the hall. "You saw a rival eliminated, a throne ripe for taking. But I survived, cousin. And I've returned to expose your treachery before the council." An elderly woman on the central throne leaned forward. Her hair was white as snow, her eyes the deep amber of aged whiskey. "Alpha King Cale, we were told you fled a challenge, that you abandoned your throne rather than face combat." "A lie, Elder Moira." Cale gestured, and Marcus's wolves dragged Tash, Senna, and Brock forward, bound in those strange glowing ropes. These three, acting on Ryland's orders, ambushed me during the new moon. 4 against 1, attacking from behind. They sought to murder me and make it appear an accident, granting Ryland an illegitimate claim to my throne. "Lies," Ryland snarled. "They acted on their own initiative, seeking glory. Then why did you promise them territory and titles?" I heard myself say, my voice cutting through his protest. Every eye in the hall turned to me, and I fought the urge to shrink back. Through my bond with Cale, I witnessed his memories of the attack. I heard Tash speak of orders given, rewards promised. Shall I share those memories with the council? Moira's eyes sharpened with interest. "Bond? What bond do you speak of, child?" I raised my wrist, letting the bracelet catch the light. "The bond mark of the old bloodlines. I am Sarah Nightwater, daughter of Elena Nightwater, descended from the line that served the Alpha Kings for generations." The mark recognized Cale as its rightful match and sealed us in the ancient oath. Murmurs rippled through the council. An old man in wolf form shifted to human, his movements stiff with age. The bloodlines were thought extinct. If what you claim is true, it changes everything. The bond mark does not lie. It cannot be fooled or manipulated. "She's a fraud," Ryland spat, but I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Some village who's bewitched my cousin." "Then let her prove it," Moira said, rising from her throne. "Let her demonstrate the power of the old blood before this council. If she is what she claims, the truth will be evident. If not—" Her eyes glittered dangerously. "Then we shall know Cale has indeed been deceived." My heart hammered. Through our bond, I felt Cale's concern, but also his faith in me. "You can do this," he assured me. "I've seen what you're capable of." Moira descended from her throne and stood before me. "Place your hand upon my brow, child. Let me see through your eyes the truth of what happened." This was different from the compulsion I'd used on the villagers, or the ward I'd manifested in desperation. This required precision, control, a delicate sharing of memory and sensation. I drew a deep breath and raised my hand to the elder's forehead. The bracelet warmed, and power flowed through me like a river finding its course. I opened my mind to Moira, letting her see through my memories. The storm, the river, finding Cale broken and bleeding in the tide pool. Our flight to the cottage, the attack by the hunters. Everything laid bare with perfect clarity. When I withdrew my hand, Moira's face had gone pale. She turned to face the council, her voice ringing with authority. "I have seen the truth. This woman speaks no lies. Cale was ambushed by order of Ryland, who sought to steal the throne through murder and deception." "No," Ryland's composure finally shattered. "I am stronger than Cale, more worthy to lead. The pack needs a ruler who isn't weakened by sentiment, by outdated oaths to human bloodlines. The pack needs a ruler who honors the old ways." Cale cut him off, his voice hard as iron. "Who understands that strength without honor is tyranny. You wanted my throne, Ryland? Then face me for it properly. Here, before the council. A formal challenge, witnessed and binding." Ryland's eyes gleamed with savage satisfaction. "Gladly. But you're still injured, cousin. Weakened. This will be over quickly." "Perhaps." Kale began removing his formal cloak, revealing the partially healed wounds beneath. But I'll die with honor rather than live as you do, crawling in shadows and calling it strength. Moira raised her hand. The challenge is witnessed. The terms are clear. Combat to submission or death. The victor claims the throne and all rights that come with it. Her gaze swept between them. Do you both accept these terms? I do, Kale said. I do, Ryland echoed, already beginning to shift. The transformation was fluid and horrifying. Ryland's wolf form was massive, his fur deep russet red, his fangs gleaming like daggers. He was uninjured, at full strength and radiating confidence. Kale shifted more slowly, still recovering from his wounds. But when he stood on 4 legs, his silver-gray fur rippling with barely contained power, I understood why he'd been chosen as Alpha King. There was something in his bearing, in the intelligence burning in those silver eyes, that spoke of authority that went beyond mere physical strength. They circled each other in the center of the hall, and the assembled wolves fell silent. Through our bond, I felt Kale's focus sharpen, felt him assessing Ryland's stance, looking for weaknesses. He's stronger, I thought desperately. Kale, you're still hurt. I know. His mental voice was calm. But he's also arrogant. And he doesn't have what I have. What's that? Someone worth fighting for. Ryland lunged first, a blur of rust-colored fury. But Kale wasn't where he'd been. Despite his injuries, he moved with grace and precision, sidestepping the attack and raking his claws across Ryland's flank as he passed. First blood to Kale. Ryland snarled, wheeling around. They clashed again and again, the sound of it echoing through the hall like thunder. Ryland fought with raw power and aggression, seeking to overwhelm through sheer force. But Kale fought smart, using his opponent's strength against him, turning Ryland's momentum into openings. Still, I could feel the toll it was taking. Each impact sent pain lancing through our bond. Kale's injured leg was holding, but barely. He couldn't keep this up much longer. Ryland must have sensed it too. He pressed his advantage, driving Kale back against one of the pillars. His jaws snapped closed on Kale's shoulder, and I felt the agony like fire in my own flesh. I didn't think, didn't plan. I simply reached for the power that had been growing stronger within me since the bond formed. The bracelet blazed with light, and I poured energy through our connection, lending Kale my strength, my will, my determination. Through the bond, I felt his surprise, then his gratitude, then his power surging as my energy merged with his own. Kale twisted in Ryland's grip, impossibly fast, and clamped his jaws around his cousin's throat. Not to kill, but to subdue, to dominate. Ryland struggled, but Kale's grip was unbreakable, reinforced by the power flowing through our bond. Submit, Kale's mental voice resonated through the hall, amplified by my power until every Lunari present could hear it. Submit or die. For a long moment, Ryland continued to struggle. Then slowly his body went limp in surrender. Kale held the position for 3 heartbeats longer, making the submission clear to all witnesses, before releasing his cousin and stepping back. Ryland shifted to human form, blood streaming from the marks on his throat. He knelt, head bowed, unable to meet Kale's eyes. I submit. The throne is yours. Moira's voice rang out. The challenge is complete. Kale's storm crown is confirmed as Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Ryland is stripped of rank and title to be held for the king's judgment. The assembled wolves howled, a sound that shook the stones. Through it all, Kale limped back to me, shifting as he walked until the man stood before me once more, breathing hard, covered in blood and sweat. We won, I whispered, hardly believing it. You won, he corrected, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. Without your strength, I would have fallen. The bond between us. Sarah, it's more powerful than anything I've ever felt. You didn't just lend me energy. You merged your will with mine, made us stronger together than either of us could be alone. So it is a soul bond then, I said softly. What you suspected. Yes. His silver eyes held mine, and I saw vulnerability there alongside the power. And soul bonds are complicated. They tie 2 people together for life. Their emotions affect each other. Their pain is shared. They can never be truly separate again. That sounds terrifying, I admitted. It is. He smiled, tired but genuine. It's also the greatest gift either of us could ever receive. If you'll accept it, if you'll accept me, and the life that comes with being bound to a Lunari king. I thought of my cottage, of my simple life gathering herbs and avoiding the villagers. I thought of everything I'd be giving up. And then I thought of the past few days, of the connection growing between us, of the way he'd fought to protect me even when he could barely stand. "I'm already bound to you," I said, raising my wrist to show the bracelet, now glowing softly with our merged power. The mark chose us before either of us had a say in it. But if I'm being honest, I met his eyes, letting him feel the truth through our bond. I would choose this anyway. I would choose you. His smile transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "Then let me do this properly." He took my hand, and despite the blood and exhaustion, despite the hall full of watching wolves, he knelt before me. "Sarah Nightwater, last of the bloodlines, keeper of the old magic. Will you stand beside me? Not as subject or servant, but as partner and equal. As my advisor in matters of both pack and magic. He hesitated, then pushed forward. "As my mate, if you'll have me." The hall had gone silent. Every eye was on us, waiting. Through our bond, I felt Cale's nervousness, his hope, his fear that I might refuse. "Yes," I said simply. "To all of it. Yes." He rose, and before I could say anything else, he was kissing me. The bond between us flared bright enough that the assembled wolves gasped, seeing the physical manifestation of our connection. Silver light poured from the bracelet, enveloping us both, sealing our choice in magic older than memory. When we finally broke apart, Moira was smiling. "It seems the old ways have returned in truth. The bloodlines live again, and the bond mark has found its match." She raised her voice. "Let it be known throughout all territories. Cale's Stormcrown rules as Alpha King, and Sarah Nightwater stands as his bonded mate and bearer of the ancient magic. Those who honor one must honor both." The wolves howled again, a sound of acceptance and celebration. Marcus approached, grinning. "Welcome to the family, Sarah. Try not to let my brother's kingship go to his head." "I heard that," Cale said, but he was smiling. Over the next hours, as we were swept into celebrations and formalities, I caught glimpses of my new life taking shape. A place at Cale's side during council meetings. A tower room where I could study the old magic with proper teachers. Respect in the eyes of wolves who would have once seen me as prey. But more than that, I felt the bond between us settling into something permanent and profound. Through it, I could sense Cale's thoughts and emotions, could offer comfort when memories of the betrayal surfaced, could share in his joy as his pack welcomed him home. And he could sense mine, could understand my nervousness about court life, could share in my wonder at discovering magic I'd never known I possessed, could offer silent support when the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm me. Late that night, after the celebrations had finally wound down, we stood together on a balcony overlooking the northern forests. The moon was waxing toward full, painting everything in silver light. "Do you regret it?" Cale asked quietly. "Saving a wounded wolf in a storm? Setting all of this in motion?" I leaned against his side, feeling his arm come around me automatically. Through our bond, I felt his contentment, his peace mingled with my own. "No," I said honestly. "I spent 15 years as an outcast, whispering to myself in an empty cottage, wondering if I'd ever belong anywhere. And then I found you. Or you found me. Either way." I looked up at him, at this man who was both fierce king and gentle partner. "I finally found where I was meant to be. With a werewolf king and a palace full of politics and danger," he pointed out. "With someone who sees me," I corrected. "Who doesn't fear what I am or whisper about my strangeness. Who chose me, bondmark or not, because of who I am, not despite it." His arms tightened around me. "The bondmark was right about you. You're exactly what I needed. What my people needed. Someone who can bridge the old ways and the new. Someone strong enough to stand beside me and brave enough to challenge me when I'm wrong. I'm sure I'll do plenty of that," I said wryly. "I'm counting on it." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "We have difficult times ahead. Ryland's followers will need to be dealt with. The pack's trust must be rebuilt. And you'll need proper training in your abilities. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is," I said. "But we'll face it together. That's what soul bonded means, right?" "That's what it means," he agreed. "Together. Always." And as we stood there in the moonlight, the bond between us humming with shared contentment, I thought of my mother. Wondered if she was watching somehow, proud that I'd finally found my way to the destiny she'd tried to prepare me for. "Trust in the old blood, Sarah. Trust in what you are." I had, and it had led me here. To magic and purpose. To a love I'd never imagined possible. To a life that was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The storm girl from Thornhaven was gone. In her place stood Sarah Nightwater, mate to the Alpha King, bearer of the ancient bloodlines, bridge between two worlds. And I was ready for whatever came next. The end.